If you're a fan of the NBA and haven't been living under a rock for the last week, you know that Damian Lillard has requested a trade from the Portland Trail Blazers. What was a several week long saga with nothing updates from Chris Haynes on how the Blazers were feeling and how Dame was feeling has now turned into a full-fledged trade request. And the teams Dame wants to go to were originally limited to Brooklyn and Miami, but now we've heard that Dame only wants to go to Miami. Now, this is potentially spinning out of control for both parties, and I don't know, it seems like we may be headed for a messy breakup here. But let's get into one of the teams that haven't really been on the radar yet that I think should go after Dame and could potentially talk him into really carrying their franchise similar to what he's done for Portland in the last few years, but maybe having a better chance to win. And that is the New Orleans Pelicans. So right now, Dame is trying to force his way to the Miami Heat, but they really don't have the trade package that Portland is interested in. And that's because Miami is pretty limited on their available picks in the near future. And also, too, you're dealing with Miami Heat picks. And, Miami is a team and a franchise that doesn't really tank. They don't at all. They've had very limited lottery picks in the last decade or so. Usually that's right at the edge of the lottery. They were the 7 seed this year, but that is, an outlier kind of thing. They had a top 20 pick, but usually you're not going to get anything. You're going to get into that probably 15 to 20 range is the highest you're going to get with a Miami Heat pick, because they're always going to be trying to compete. They're always going to be a free agent destination and a place that players want to get traded to, as you can see with Damian Lillard right now. So on top of the picks not really being lucrative for Portland, also the players going back, they would have to most likely take or reroute Tyler Hero. And Portland has no interest in Tyler Hero. I understand that. He's not a trash asset, but I understand from Portland's situation and who they have on their roster, not really being interested in taking back Tyler Hero. So that's where we are right now with Miami. They really don't have that good of an offer at the moment that sounds like they're putting on the table. But I think New Orleans can really come in here and throw an offer down that really makes Portland think twice about this and potentially going to the table to talk to Dame about accepting a trade there. I mean, in reality, he doesn't have no trade clause, so he can get traded wherever they see fit. But so he can get traded wherever they want. But I do think that the team getting Dame in this situation would want to sit down with him and talk about the direction they see for the franchise and him and all of that. So the Pelicans here, one of the trades that I have kind of gone into for the Pelicans, as you can see here on the screen, I think if we're talking about the position the Pelicans are in, I think any trade for Dame would have to include Zion Williamson. You may see, like, a lot of Pelicans fans may not understand why getting rid of Zion at this point in time, but I think this is a good opportunity to get off this asset that it could be an asset that I think is going to be a liability going forward. And you've drafted well. You have players like Trey Murphy. You're re-signing Herb Jones. Brandon Ingram has started to come into his own in the last couple of years. You're going to lock him up long term. I think you've got some pieces there and some future draft assets that you can continue to build this team. And I think Dame Lillard is a player that the community is going to rally around. And I think this is a player that you can build, really build some sustained success around him. I really think you can build some success with this player. And you don't really have to worry about health. A lot of the concerns with Zion go out the window. And from the Trailblazers perspective, you may look at this and say, well, you just said all those things about Zion. Why would we want that player? Well, let's think about this. Is there a player with the upside of Zion Williamson that you're getting back in a Damian Lillard trade? No. You're looking at somebody like Tyler Hero that you don't even want right now, a player that, aside from the hand injury, has been pretty healthy, but he's, a sixth man of the year, he's not going to be an all-star most likely. He's kind of a one-dimensional scorer. He's not a franchise player by any means. He's not an all-NBA player. You tried to go after Mikal Bridges. There's no way they're trading Mikal Bridges. They weren't even going to trade you Cam Johnson, who's not what Mikal Bridges can be. Who else is out there, right? The Clippers. You're not getting any players from the Clippers that are worth anything close to what Zion, the ceiling of Zion could be, or even like right below the ceiling of Zion. People talk about Terrence Mann all the time. Like, come on, give me a break. Maybe the Sixers, right? That's been talked about. What are you going to take James Harden back? Are you going to take Tyrese Maxey back? Another guard under 6'5"? I don't really think, while I do believe Maxey is probably a better asset by himself than Zion Williamson, I don't think for what Portland has, I think the potential of what Zion could be if he figures it out is much better. Like with what they have with Simons, with Scoot, with Shaden Sharp, having that, that front court player in Zion that clearly is an all-NBA, all-star caliber player when he's healthy and when he's figured it out, which I don't think is impossible. I think the team receiving Zion is in a different position than the team that has had him for the last few years in this situation. And I think you can really sell yourself on the upside of Zion coming into your building for the first time. Whereas New Orleans, you've dealt with this for so long that it's really hard to see past the problems that you've had and the issues that you've had. Now, yeah, if you're the New Orleans, are you giving up on a what was believed to be a once in a lifetime kind of player? The guy who was compared, the best prospect since LeBron James, right? So I think you have to cut bait given what has happened over the last few years. And if you cut bait, it has to be for a player like Dame. It can't be for just some like scrape by package, right? You can't just get rid of him to get rid of him. It has to be something for like a player that for the next 4 or 5 years is going to be somebody that's going to put butts in the seats. Now, let's go back to this from the Trailblazers perspective. Another reason why you do this. The Pelicans have draft assets, unlike, the Miami Heat. Now, if Brooklyn ends up working out a trade here, I think they could rival these, probably supersede these draft assets the Trailblazers are getting. But I'm taking Brooklyn off the table because I don't really think they have interest in doing anything with the Blazers. So not only does New Orleans have their own picks going forward, they also have one last pick from the Lakers, I think, in 2024. We're going to take that off the table because the Lakers are competing right now. You're not going to want that pick. But something that is intriguing is these Milwaukee picks that they have down the line. So there's a 2026 and a 2027 Milwaukee Bucks first-round pick that they have. They have each of those picks. Right now, we're seeing a aging team that is experiencing some strife. We're already getting the Giannis rumors are already starting about, is he going to sign the extension? Is this going to be where he plays? You've got an aging core around him. Brook Lopez is 35. Chris Middleton has been injured. Is he really going to be enough to get them there? When you really start to think about it, people start to break down that title that they won. And this is going to happen going forward. I'm not trying to take away from the Bucks, but I think this is what just inevitably happens as you get farther and farther removed from a title. People start to break down like, oh, was that a fraudulent title? Was that that's just what's going to happen on the cycle of takes, right? So I really think that you could sell yourself on these ticks. I mean, you've got this is 2 to 3 years in advance, 2, 3, 4 years in advance. For Milwaukee, I mean, Giannis could be gone. The Middleton contract's going to be up. This could really be a totally different team that you're betting on in a market that hasn't been a traditional winner. So if Giannis does leave, I mean, you've really got yourself set up for some nice assets there. And then maybe you get a future asset from New Orleans back, a franchise that's also not been the most well run. So you're putting yourself, okay, 7 years down the line, we've got a top 3 protected. Pelicans pick. I mean, who knows who's playing for them at the time? I mean, Dame's contract would be up before then. Maybe he's re-signed there. He's going to be in his late 30s. Maybe he's gone on to somewhere else. I think those are 3 very solid draft assets that you could sell yourself on because the next year or two, the best draft asset the Blazers are going to have is their own pick. So you don't need to get too hung up on the very near future, because the middle part of the West is really beefing up their roster. I mean, we saw that with free agency this week. I mean, you can go through a lot of these kind of fringe playoff teams, and there's going to have to be 2 or 3 teams in the West that are going to be the bottom feeders, right? And I don't think the Blazers have a bad team per se, but when you compare it to the rest of the West and what is happening, who's competing, who's going, who's being aggressive. If you're one of those teams that is a tad bit less aggressive than the others, you could easily slide down into this, oh, you're the bottom team in the West or the bottom two teams in the West. And all of a sudden you've got a top 5 draft pick, right? Because the East is also, some of those fringe lottery teams are also trying to compete. So you've got an opportunity here to continue this string of luck around your own draft pick. And I think in the next year and maybe the next 2 years, that's probably your best asset. So you can push the pick assets that you're getting back in this Dame trade further down the line to where potentially your pick is middle to end of the first round, and these picks are potentially in the lottery. You're just trying to give yourself a swing. And if not, if Giannis resigns for another 5 years, you just, you trade these picks at the deadline. You get some role player talent or something for him. You still retain flexibility, not to mention you've got 5 years of Zion as well in this trade. And I do think this is something that the Pelicans would entertain because they've, like I said, they're not really hamstringing themselves with the draft assets. They're kind of putting their chips on the table right now to get a player, Hall of Fame, All NBA player in Damian Lillard. They're cutting bait on a asset that has caused them a lot of stress in Zion. And, 2 other just contracts that don't really matter. I think with the Zion piece and the draft picks, nothing else really has to be thrown in here. So I think from both teams' perspective, this is something that they would entertain. Now, the wild card here is Dame, right? Doesn't want to play there. It would really take some selling to get to sell him on New Orleans, I would imagine. I know you got Brandon Ingram. Maybe Ingram is the best wing that, Dame would have potentially ever played with, right? Like, I don't know. CJ McCollum is still there. It's his old teammate. Maybe there's something there to be like, hey, maybe CJ can talk to Dame and be like, look, we always, when we were together competing at our highest level, which is the farthest that the Blazers ever made it with Dame was when CJ was there. Could CJ potentially sell Dame on, look, we always wanted to have a wing like Brandon Ingram, a guy who could take the playmaking load, a guy who could take over a game if needed, and we could be even secondary in that in a given game. They've got some young players coming in. They've got some flexibility. We've got defenders. We've got future draft assets that we can continue to build this with. Maybe that's something. Maybe you look to trade CJ for more short-term help. Maybe McCollum is another player that you can trade for to build around. There's different ways you can sell him on this, but this is definitely one of the trades that both teams should consider. And like I said, it just comes down to that wild card about Damian Lillard. So let me know what you think in the comments. If this would happen, do you think anybody but Miami is even going to be entertained? I also think that Miami, as the summer goes on, I don't think this is something that's going to happen in the next couple of weeks. I think this is going to be closer to when the season starts, when this trade happens. And one of the reasons is because if a Miami trade happens, I imagine that the Blazers are going to push for Jaime Jaquez to be included in that trade, and the Heat just signed him to his contract, and they're playing in Summer League right now. So I believe it has to be 2 months until he can be traded. So it would have to be right before the season starts. So I don't think that anything is going to happen before then. So we're probably going to have a quiet, or not quiet, but we're going to have a July and an August without any transactions here, probably on this front. So, but let me know, like I said, let me know what you think. If there's any other teams that we should consider, I'd love to make more videos like this, exploring kind of the options that these teams have. So anyway, please like and subscribe. Helps the channel, helps me figure out what to keep making. Yeah, thanks for tuning in. Peace.